Hello, everyone, and welcome to iCritic Live. This is the podcast where we talk about entertainment, pop culture, and life in between. I'm your host, Kevin T. Rodriguez, film critic of iCritic.net, and thank you for spending a few minutes of your time here with me today. And just a bit of a heads up, there be politics ahead. Yes, sirree. By golly, there be politics ahead. Why am I doing a pirate voice? I have no idea. It's Monday. Or at least it's going to be Monday by the time you hear this. It's actually Saturday, and I don't know. I guess doing a pirate voice is just the easiest way to evoke something dark side. Let's move on. We've already gotten off to a shaky enough start. So, South Park is back in a really big way. They aired their first episode of season 27 a day after signing a $1.5 billion deal that will keep the show in production for 5 more years and on streaming platform Paramount Plus for those 5 years as well. Now, I am happy, really giddy at the idea of 5 more seasons of South Park, even though it's only going to amount to 50 episodes at the end of the day. TV shows, they just don't make as many episodes as they used to. But whether or not we'll even get all 50 episodes, that's a big question for debate, because I'm sure you've heard that Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they took Paramount's money and they decided to thank Paramount for making them billionaires by basically spitting in their face and trying to ruin a huge $8 billion merger deal that I think was largely being held up because of a lawsuit President Donald Trump had against the company. Now, there's a lot of moving parts in this, and when I say that Trey and Matt spit in Paramount's face, to be perfectly honest, they were totally in the right to do it. And it showed that they had true balls, because the thing that Trey and Matt have always been most consistent about is they are against censorship. They believe in an everything is all right or nothing is all right to make fun of world. And we've seen them do this time and time again. They went to public war with Comedy Central over the depiction of Muhammad in a 2-part episode that basically is remembered primarily because they also kind of dumped on Family Guy a bit. They also made Tom Cruise the bad guy in one of their episodes when he tried to threaten Paramount if they did not pull an episode on Scientology. Although they were a little bit more cautious on that one, because since Scientology is known to sue people, all the credits said John Smith and Jane Doe. That's the only 2 people credited in the entire episode. So they were being cautious, but they're feeling a little bit more emboldened now, I believe. And look, there have been dissections of this episode from much bigger YouTubers and podcasters than me. What could I add to this conversation? Well, here's what I can add to the conversation. I can admit that this, in many ways, was absolutely brilliant television. What this represented for South Park and even for defenders of free speech is nothing short of mind-boggling. And it can still not be the greatest episode in the world. And in fact, dare I say it, the episode might not even age that well. And that's where I have to kind of get in there. Now, here's the thing. I have made my dislike for Trump very well known if you follow me on social media. And if you listen to my episode on the Trump Bible, which is ironically one of my most downloaded episodes despite it having the least amount to do with what I talk about here, you'll know that I am not particularly a fan of Donald Trump. I don't care for the guy. I actually think he's quite dangerous, if I'm being honest. But I also don't try to demonize his supporters. In fact, whenever my parents say, I can't believe people and Christians would vote for this man, well, first of all, I'll give them the Christian part, because I don't know how Christians can vote for this man. But when it comes to everyday people and they say, I just don't know why anyone would vote for this guy, I'm like, well, give it half a second's thought. Why do you think they vote for him? It's not that they're all just stupid. It's because he's speaking issues that they care about. And also, I'm going to be honest, the Democrats are pushing some theories that I am personally not crazy about. Policies that I think, if the legislation passed, it would do great harm to the country. I'm not going to get into what that is here because that's kind of besides the point. But I am very much in the middle of this whole thing. That's the point I'm trying to make and how it relates to this. I think Donald Trump is a menace. I think he is a danger. I really wish he had not won the re-election. But I also understand why someone would vote for someone like him, especially if it pertains to a few issues that, for lack of a better word, some people would criticize those people for being hateful for having some of those positions, where I think there's actually a much deeper conversation to be had about those concerns, and we should probably be taking them more seriously to find a in-the-middle solution that everyone should, in theory, be a little unhappy with and a little unhappy with, which is how you know it's a great compromise. I mean, I think that is such well-known wisdom. They even said it in Game of Thrones. But that being said, let's talk about why this episode is great. And one of the reasons it's great is for what it represents. Trey and Matt definitely got screwed over in this whole Paramount merger thing. And they did not like what they were seeing happen with Paramount. Partly because, honestly, the acquisition should have went through months ago. The fact that this approval process took basically a year and only got approved after Paramount settled a lawsuit with President Trump, and the idea that the presidents can sue people while they're in office and controlling major decisions that could make or break businesses, that seems like it's a huge conflict of interest. I don't care what side of the debate you're on. That should not be allowed, but I'll let Congress try to figure that one out. So Trump decides to sue CBS, which is owned by Paramount, for, $20 billion, some crazy number like that, for basically deceptively editing a Kamala Harris interview where he claimed she looked more intelligent than she actually was, and that they were trying to interfere in the election by doing it. Now, how petty do you have to be to file this lawsuit after you win the presidency? I think he saw an easy target because he saw that, hey, they need FCC approval. He was now basically in charge of the FCC. He could make those decisions and basically sued them. And I believe personally that the $16 million that they're giving Trump, as well as $20 million in pro-Trump advertising, which, what the heck does Donald Trump need $20 million in pro-Trump advertising? He can't run again. What is this about other than ego? But I believe that was tantamount to a bribe. I do believe that. And also, a few days after Stephen Colbert, host of the Late Night Show, criticized the deal and called it a bribe, Paramount decides to fire him. Now, they claimed it was because of financial reasons, and that very well may be true, because I have no doubt that the Late Show was losing a lot of money because late night television just is not as profitable as it used to be, because they canceled the show outright. They're not replacing him. But that being said, the optics really could not have been worse. It just looked like that was part of the reason that Paramount got rid of him, was basically because he was critical of Trump. And then Trump did a victory dance on Truth social media and basically said in so many words, watch out, Kimmel, Fallon, and whoever the third guy is. I'm sorry, I can't remember because I don't watch late night television. Maybe Stewart? I don't know. Watch out, you guys, because, you're next. And this is not something the president of the United States should be worrying about. I cannot stress that, even though I understand why some people voted for him, this is not a good man in the White House. But anyway, obviously Trey and Matt are going to look at this and they're going to say something. They actually skipped the election last year because they just were tired of talking about it. And they don't want to turn into the Trump network like everything else is. Because I agree, Trump is everywhere on TV and it gets so exhausting, and most of it is not funny. And Trey and Matt know this. That's why they try to avoid talking about him when they can, and then why they wanted to skip the whole election. But I believe these actions got to a point where they just could not stay silent. They saw freedom of expression under attack. And this is something that's very near and dear to their heart. Heck, the South Park movie is all about censorship. So of course they're going to have to say something about this. But, well, not but, like here, so what do? They decide to not only take jabs at Paramount, but they decide to just eviscerate Trump in the most childish, low-hanging fruit possible. And keep those words in mind, because that's going to come into why this episode might not be as good as some people say it is. But here's where it is great. For what it represents boldness. It represents freedom of speech. It represents two people who are willing to put everything on the line to say what they believe. Like the fact that we're still questioning if there's going to be a second episode in a couple days. I think there will be, but whether they'll get through episode 5 of this season before the plug being pulled, I don't know. The FCC deal did go through, but what if Trump tries to sue them again? I mean, Trey and Matt have definitely taken the safety brakes off this whole merger thing and potentially cost the company millions, if not billions more dollars. Who knows what is going to happen? So for those reasons, this episode was just so important. You know what it was kind of like? It was kind of like, I think it was season 3. No, it couldn't have been season 3. It was probably season 4. Where after they had come back after 9/11, their first episode after 9/11, basically they were being told, you can't make fun of this, you can't make fun of that, you can't talk about 9/11, you have to be more serious this time. And they said, no, we're going to make people laugh. And they basically turned Osama bin Laden into a cartoon character. It was a Looney Tunes short made in South Park style. And it might not be the greatest episode of all time, but as a nostalgia critic pointed out, it told people it was okay to laugh again. And that is what I think this episode does. Like, I think some comedians and everything, they're starting to feel a little nervous about making fun of Trump because he is using his power to undermine people's criticism of him. Now, whether you agree with that criticism or not, that's besides the point. You are allowed to criticize him. And the fact that he is suing people and organizations that do that is very troublesome. So they are daring Trump to sue them. Now, Trump himself has not responded, which I think is actually more worrying for them than anything else. The White House did say that the show had not been relevant for 20 years, which if that's the case, why are you even talking about it? But whatever. And so for these reasons, this episode was really important, and it's going to go down as a pivotal moment in television history. Now then, without that context, what is the episode like? And here is where I will give some of the Trump supporters some due, if you will. The episode is maybe not as funny as we want it to be outside of this context. Keep in mind, a lot of this is so brilliant and so daring because of the timing of it all. Trey and Matt just took $1.5 billion with a B. They are now billionaires, and they threw their whole career in jeopardy basically to spite Trump, who they considered is a threat to free speech. That is the timing that is making this so hilarious. But let's say, hypothetically speaking, this is the last we hear Trump comment on the show. Let's say the show goes on for 5 more years. Let's say this is not the final episode, like some people are fearing it's going to be. Let's say South Park not only goes through another 5 years, but maybe it gets another 5 years after that. Who knows? Maybe it gets to season 40. I wouldn't complain if it's still as funny as it is typically. Well, let's start taking the days away from this, and the weeks and the months, and then eventually the years, because time just keeps moving and it's not slowing down. Guess what? You're going to be watching the episode almost out of context years down the line. Remember how I said that they were doing low-hanging fruit and that this is them being juvenile even for South Park standards? There's a reason for that. Because they are going after the most basic complaints about Trump. They're not exactly saying anything insightful. They're not even saying anything that's new. Heck, the jokes about Trump's little wee-wee, if you will, I'm using that word just in case my nieces and nephews are listening. Please do not ask your parents about this if you are. That has been an insult for him since the first round of debates in 2015 or 14. Like, that has been a complaint. The fact that Trump is small-minded and he just doesn't do his job well. Like, these are all jokes that have been made for years. Heck, HBO made a cartoon show about Trump where they basically made the easiest jokes about him in the world. I can't remember the show name. Forgive me. I'll post the name of the show in the comment section or the description after the recording. But yeah, South Park isn't exactly treading new ground when it comes to these Trump jokes. They're not particularly insightful. And I think that does give Trump supporters almost a little ammunition to suggest that this is a bitter episode. And in all fairness, I think it totally is a bitter episode. Because again, they care about free speech and they see what's happening and they see how his interference with the merger affected them. Of course they were going to say something. Are we going to see more Trump in the future? I honestly have no idea. I would hope that the humor would be a little bit more insightful than this, though. Because having watched the episode a few times at this point, it kind of dawned on me that the Trump stuff was actually aging rather poorly very quickly. Now, the timing was still great, but I realized, like, what happens if someone watches this even 7 months down the line? Unless this is the final episode, then the episode's power is probably going to be diminished the more time goes on. And so I will give the Trump supporters that much, is that the humor was cheap. It was meant to be cheap. It was deliberately meant to be immature. Heck, it was meant to be so immature that only a thin-skinned individual would bother to respond to it. And guess what? The White House did respond to it. So what does that tell you about the person who's in the Oval Office? So, yeah, this is in some ways one of South Park's best episodes. It's by far the most ambitious thing they've done, and it got people talking in ways that this show hasn't had people talking in many a year. But as time goes on, I think it's also going to prove to be one of the least noteworthy episodes, especially when it comes to political commentary, because there's really just not much to be found here. And I'm also kind of wondering why Trey and Matt are still doing this thing where every season they seem to be examining what their place in the world is, especially now that wokeness is sort of dying, if you will. And I know they do this every few years, but I think it's kind of getting a little redundant, if I'm being perfectly honest. Either way, I cannot wait to see what the next episode brings. So far, it appears that the government is not doing anything. So far, it appears that Paramount is not canceled the show. We're just going to have to see what happens. In the meantime, and this, gosh, I know this one's going to get a lot of comments. Try to be nice, guys. I would like to know what you think of this episode, of the politics. Do you agree with them? Do you disagree with them? Do you think this was South Park's finest hour, or do you think it was not their finest hour? If you are listening to this podcast on a platform where comments are welcome, please, by all means, leave a comment. Let's have a discussion. If this is your first time listening to the podcast and you like what you hear, why don't we make it official and you subscribe? We're on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, and all the podcasting platforms of your choice. And as always, I'll see you at the movies. Take care, everyone. Hey, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for making it to the end. Just a few more things. First of all, the names that you see on the screen, these are our Patreon and YouTube member supporters.
And I thank each and every one of them. Their support helps me make exclusive videos for Patreon and YouTube members, as well as keep the channel running, and of course is just of huge kindness to me. Also, don't forget to check out the iCritic-led podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, Deezer, whatever podcasting service you listen to, it is there. We definitely want to see you there. And hey, there's also other videos that you can check out. So, check out these other channels, these other videos, especially that one. I think that's a really good one.